Welcome to Business Unmuted, thanks to our sponsor Virtue Motors, one of the UK's largest motor retailers, representing some of the world's best manufacturers of cars, vans and motorcycles. Check out its website at virtuemotors.com. I'm Robb and I've owned Recognition PR for nearly 35 years. We have 75 clients in multiple sectors based across the UK. They have between them a turnover of around £6 billion and employ around 30,000 people. Now, that puts us at the front line of the business community and perfectly placed to discuss the economic climate. Now, we've got a full house today here in our studio. We've got Nigel Peacock and Tim Lambert, the architects firm Spar Architects. They are representatives of that firm. Nigel and Tim are both experienced architects based in North Yorkshire and deliver innovative buildings across multiple sectors. We also have Nicky Jolley, the founder and managing director of HR Today in Darlington. Nicky is an HR professional with more than 2 decades of experience and works across SMEs and privately owned businesses all across the UK. And down the line, we have Donna James, Research Director at Populus Select, a firm that matches professionals, executives and CEOs to organisations, particularly in STEM sectors. So welcome everyone. Now you can see we're gentlemen have all got our ties on, black tie on, and Nicky and Donna both respectfully wearing black, and we've got a lovely picture of our late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. It's been an extraordinary week. It's been like a lifetime in a week, really. What do you think, Nicky?
I think it's ever so sad. She's been there all my life. My husband described it, it's like losing your grandma, I have to say, and I think it's going to affect all of us over different periods of time.
Yes,
it's very sad.
I think that's right. I also think that King Charles has been absolutely magnificent in the last few days.
You can't imagine, can you, what he's been through? No, not at all.
And what were your first thoughts then, Donna?
Incredibly sad, and I know we all extend deepest condolences to the royal family, but we all got used to Her late Majesty being there. She was a constant, she was a lodestone, and we never really believed it would happen, although we knew it would. And I agree with you. I think King Charles III is going to be splendid. And I like to refer to the monarch as the most senior non-exec director in the land.
And I think that's absolutely right.
I think we're in good hands with King Charles.
I think that's absolutely correct. So, Nigel and Tim, your first time in our Business Unmuted studio, and a sad week to come in. Did you have any reflections on what you've seen in the last week?
It's been absolutely amazing. Just extraordinary, just watching the scenes unfold. I mean, we're all in uncharted territory as far as what comes next. We don't know, but I think it's important to focus on the Queen and what a fantastic role model she's been. And to be working so far into life,
that's absolutely
well
right.
Into her 90s is incredible.
We had an electrician visiting our office block on the day after she passed away, and he was saying, my goodness, he said, if some of my team were going to get that work ethic, 2 days before her sad death, and she's conducting a very high position of state job, the transfer of Prime Minister, and did it with a smile on her face as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tim, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think she's an incredible woman. I've got 2 young daughters, and they're just kind of getting their head around what's going on, but it's really interesting to speak to them about all the different processions and the rules and regulations that go on, and the swearing in of the new king, and it's really interesting for me as well.
My daughter was telling me that my granddaughter, who's only 6, had something very interesting to say. My daughter Jessica said to my granddaughter, watch the television, you're seeing history being made. To which my little granddaughter Alice, the 6-year-old, said, Mummy, you always say that. And actually, in the last few years, in 6 years, that is true. She always says it. There's Brexit, there's obviously the Queen, there's the Prime Minister, there's changing hands, there's history being made all the time. The pandemic, we've lived through momentous times, haven't we?
We have.
I think last week takes a bit of beating.
It certainly does.
New Prime Minister.
New Prime Minister and monarch.
Absolutely. Well, look, let's just talk about this one element on personnel with you. You, Nicky, of course, advise firms on personnel issues and HR issues. What if companies what do not need or wish to close, particularly maybe someone in hospitality and so on. The day of the funeral is a perverse bank holiday being the wrong word, I suppose, but it is a public closure day. What are the rules and regs?
Well, the official rules are, it all comes down to how your contracts are written. So if it says in your contract that you are entitled to bank holidays, they are entitled to this as they were for the Jubilee. If it says your holidays are plus 8 statutory bank holidays, you are not legally entitled to this day. I have to say, so far, not one of our clients has refused to give this as a bank holiday. I appreciate there's some sectors that can't give the date, so what they're doing is giving an additional day later down the line.
A lot of my team actually want to have the time to watch the funeral, actually. There is a genuine desire to take a moment to pause and so on. And we are closing our offices. And I'm being very clear with clients, if you want to have advice on that day, then we actually may charge you more money if you need to have a phone call. What's your position?
We are closing, absolutely. The minute it was announced, we WhatsApped our team just to say we just want to be very clear in the respect of the Queen. We will be closing on Monday. And
for me, that means closing as in no work. It doesn't mean closing as in people work from home unless there's an emergency. Donna, what about you?
Our office is closed. No work is expected. That was made very clear to allow people to mourn our magnificent late Queen.
Yes, and the same, I presume.
We've decided to close the office for the day.
Yeah. Okay. Nicky, we've looked at the unemployment figures that were published today. Let's talk about some of the business of the day that isn't to do with Her Majesty's sad passing. The unemployment figures came out today, and they are remarkably resilient given all the problems in the economy. Just to look at the national figure, it's 3.6%, remarkably low, the lowest since the early 1970s. In the northeast, under 5%, and in my lifetime it's only been the last year that unemployment has been below 5% and consistently around 5%. Normally it's been 10%. What are these unemployment figures doing in your experience for people who are looking to both recruit and to manage their staff?
It's still difficult. Everybody is still they're still struggling to actually recruit and get people through the door. We've got people that are struggling to get people to attend an interview. They're just not turning up. So there's still a shortage of people. We still need more. There's huge skill gaps, which unfortunately I believe is going to get worse because minimum wage is going up. And what my trends are showing is people would rather employ more skilled people and pay more money because they're getting more out of them than people at the lower end who need to learn and develop. So we've had a skill shortage for years, and I unfortunately feel we're making that worse, and it's only going to get worse over the next couple of years. So I think we need to have a reform. We need to be helping better with training schemes, apprentices. People are not taking apprentices on because of the bureaucracy behind them. There's a whole big issue here that needs to be addressed.
This is a very unpopular thing to say. If the general public are listening to me saying this, I'm sure they will be able to see it. But the minimum wage, which I'm generally very supportive of, it is quite rigid at the moment, isn't it? If you look at, say, a coffee shop in the town centre, if you want someone full-time on the minimum wage, you will have to be paying them nearly £20,000 a year, and you won't be able to increase the price of your coffee and so on to justify that, will you?
There are people that would be willing to work for less. And I think we have such a shortage at the moment that there needs to be some opportunity for that to happen, whether it's retired people, there's ways and means it can be looked at. I think we need to be careful of modern slavery. I absolutely agree that it's not about abusing people, but it's about the affordability. We're all pulling in the purse strings. Everybody believes there's going to be a recession. People are looking at costs. We all are. I'm looking at my fixed costs. I'm looking at how I can ensure that my business is still going to be there. I think it's fact we're not going to have some businesses. They're not going to survive the next couple of years coming in this recession. I think we need to be looking at how we manage getting people through the door in an affordable way that we can develop their skills and pay. The biggest problem you've got is your skilled people are suffering because companies can't afford to pay the skilled people what they're entitled to because they're paying the minimum wage. And I know it's an unpopular subject, but there has to be a means and a way for people to come in at entry level, develop and actually work in the organisation to build those skills to then be rewarded to what they're entitled to.
Well, you mentioned retired people there, and that's an interesting point because it is possible to have a minimum wage for an apprentice that's slightly lower. So you don't have the skills, you're younger, you can have a slightly different minimum wage. Would it be, do you think, fair and equitable to say to someone who's maybe retired from their regular job and is claiming the state pension that maybe they could have a minimum wage that was slightly less, not obviously slave labour, but that valued their time and their effort as well? I don't know, for particularly lighter duties like working in a coffee shop or that kind of thing.
It would ease the pressure that we're all suffering. Everybody's working long hours. They're all having to plug the gap. Service is falling. You know, I do think there are things that we can be looking at, and there are other sources of employees, aren't there, as well?
Donna, of course, you're at a very different end of the scale, not the minimum wage end. You're trying to place really highly skilled people in jobs. What do you think the issue of the current economy is doing in terms of mobility of those people, the willingness to move?
What we're seeing is that indeed it's a candidates market, and whereas you might think that people want to stay in their roles because, you know, the economic storm clouds gathering, actually we're seeing people moving, and they're willing to move because they're in a very strong position. And a lot of these professional level candidates are looking for different things from their employment. A lot are being led by values. They want employers to be a lot more flexible, providing flexible working hours and hybrid working, etc. But a lot of these high-level professionals are saying to us, I want to do something worthwhile. I want to work for a company that has great values and values their employees, not necessarily in terms of high wages, but in terms of progression, in terms of clear goals, and crucially, and I've seen this across all sectors, in terms of autonomy of action. So not being micromanaged, but being given clear targets, clear goals, and able to make that strategy and take those decisions to attain those targets.
Okay. Now, in the context of the economy, there's a lot of... we've had a torrent, until the Queen passed away, there was a torrent of bad news literally flooding the airwaves, whether it be this economic forecaster or that economic forecaster, or the GDP being lower than expected, or interest rates going up more because the Bank of England had to play catch up. But the one thing that wasn't affected was the jobs market. It felt that it's a downturn with no implication on jobs. Is this possible? Is this the real deal, do you think, or is it just a lagging indicator, Donna?
Many commentators have said, oh, well, at last we're seeing a fall in the vacancy rates. And that is true in today's release, that the number of vacancies has dropped slightly, but we still see a huge number of vacancies, still 1.2 million unfilled jobs. Now, you know, that's massive. It's a really tight labour market. And also, I think this is shown by the jobs data, again released today by the Office for National Statistics, that show that there are a record high number of jobs, mostly led by employed jobs. There are some indicators showing an increase in self-employed jobs. So now I think it is possible that jobs are still being created. Now, our placements are for newly created roles, newly created jobs. The people that we're placing are not going in to replace others. And, you know, this, I'm talking in the Northeast, I'm talking nationally and internationally, jobs are being created still. And that's a large part, perhaps, because of the sectors we work in, the great innovators. We're working in biotech, green tech, and so on and so forth. And, you know, that is echoed in the Northeast, where we see great innovation. We have nearly 50% of Northeast companies being classified as innovation active. That means they're trying to improve their products and processes. So I don't think it's lagging. It may slow, but we're seeing job creation, definitely. So I think we can look positively at some of the economic indicators.
Donna, thank you for that contribution. And I think if we were to take Donna at face value, and I think we should, she's obviously got some evidence here. So we look at Tim and Nigel from Spar Architects. It's clear that the Bank of England isn't going to have, it's going to have to take this real. The unemployment isn't going down. Therefore, if you want to cool the economy down, interest rates are going up. And we've had the MPC delay its decision because of the period of national mourning. Perhaps when the MPC from the Bank of England comes back, interest rates will go up again. Now you're in long-term projects, forward planning. You're there designing projects for domestic and commercial use. Do you think that the economy is going to be overheating? Do you think it's justified to put the interest rates up? Nigel?
It's a good question. I hope they don't put the interest rates up, because from developers generally obviously don't like interest rates, because they're borrowing huge sums of money to pay for these developments. And even some of the larger developments that we do that have an extent of government money put into them, they've still got a shortfall to find. So if they're having to borrow money at higher rates, effectively it's bound to reduce the amount of building work that they decide to do, ultimately.
Now, you're at the sharp end because you're at the front end of a forward project for construction.
Yes,
what you design today may not be built for a couple of years. So what is your inquiry levels like?
We've gone through a bit of a lull earlier this year, to be honest, which resulted in a bit of a low workload. We're glad to say it's beginning to pick up a little bit, but predominantly on the social housing side, where there's that little bit of government investment. Let's
talk about what you do specialise in, because I know that in the northeast of England you've been doing work on specialist labs for the pharmaceutical sector.
We have indeed, yeah.
And also extra care housing, as you just alluded to, specialist again for elderly or people with special needs. So that kind of project is something that requires a degree of specialisation then?
It is indeed. We actually have a team of very experienced staff who know the products inside out. And just going back to what we're saying about bringing younger people in, it's actually something we'd like to do. Except the trouble is, while we've got so many older people, they're all on good salaries, we can't justify more bodies on seats just yet. But we do need to bring in fresh ideas to liven things up a little.
Now Tim, you handle the domestic side, people's houses, and there you are based in Stokesley, between two national parks, the Dales to the east, the west of you, the North Yorkshire Moors to the east of you. I suppose that kind of work, specialist refurbing, particularly in national parks, this is something that you need to understand some of the rules and regs on.
Yeah, certainly North Yorkshire Moors National Park, where we do quite a lot of remodelling, refurbishment work, extensions. They're quite stringent in terms of the planning rules that we need to abide by. So you often find, if we're talking about economically, kind of the budget constraints are less so than the statutory constraints. So that's where kind of our specialisms come in. We get to analyse the projects. We give a good clear indication of what they can and can't do, but also we try and push the boundaries a little bit for our clients. We try and look to kind of renewable, sustainable energy, making buildings more thermally efficient, and try and kind of bring the authorities to look at a kind of more contemporary approach than your traditional barn conversions and
sounds like your grand designs in person. You're the grand designs of Stokesley.
We're trying, and I think over the last couple of years we've tried to kind of improve the quality of the developments and try and raise some of our clients' aspirations a little bit, and just explain to them that it doesn't particularly cost a lot more money to do what we're proposing, but just a little bit of innovation, a little bit of foresight of and a bit of a kind of a dream of creating a better home or business premises or whatever whatever the project is.
Now I don't know if you're called SPA architects or SPA architects. I don't know.
It's
How
actually
do you
SPA.
SPA, that's
Yeah.
right. But the architects firm that you work with has now been a very, very long-serving firm in the northeastern Yorkshire, hasn't it?
It is indeed 52 years.
52 years. What changes have you seen? You've worked for a long time, but in your tenure in this recent times, what changes are you seeing to the way your practice works?
It's the technological side, really. I mean, when I first joined the practice back in 95, I think it was, we still had drawing boards.
Right.
And there was a mix between the drawing boards and the computers, and some of us were a little bit frightened of computers. I think the same people still are a little bit frightened. It's the younger ones who seem to be able to make the most of them. But absolutely everything is done on a computer. And we don't even post drawings out to people now.
And what about the way in which planning permissions are decided? There's a lot of scope, but in the recent government changeover, Liz Truss was saying before she became Prime Minister that she needed to speed up the actual decisions, not necessarily change the rules, but get them to sped up. Have you noticed, and would you like to see changes in that?
We'd like to see changes. We'd like everything to be speeded up a little bit. But there's so much to take into consideration now. You know, they say they want to speed things, but then they introduce new issues. You know, we've got ecology issues to look at. Nutrient issues is a current one in this area, which is causing problems. You've got all sorts of supporting information that's required. We have to look at ground investigations just before we even get to that.
Before you even design the front door, you've got to look at all that.
Absolutely.
I think that there's a couple of issues, isn't there? There's the issues that Nigel has discussed, which is over the last 10, 15 years, we've probably increased the amount of information we submit for a planning application by about 75%, if not more. There's also an issue of available staff at the local authorities to deal with the applications. I think at this moment in time they're inundated, both planning and building control inundated with applications, and there's just not enough staff to deal with them.
But before we talk I'm going to end in a moment, but before we talk ourselves into a gloomy bit, I was very pleased that I was talking to two major businesses that I know well just in the last 24 hours about how their business has been. And one of them runs a big subscription service, and one of them sells high-end consumer products. And they both said that on the weekend after the energy price cap was announced, there was a distinct upturn in take-up because people had gone home and worked out what their energy bills were. The energy price cap has made a big difference, and certainly if you take the anecdotal evidence I've just given, then hopefully that will be as good as will counter any interest rate rise and more, because that's the big worry that people had.
Well, we've got photovoltaics on our house, so we tend to just put things like the dryer and the washing machine on when the sun's out. So
there we are. That's the way to do it. Well, if you want to know how to get around the energy price cap, talk to SPA Architects, and they'll be able to work it out for you. But Nicky, Donna, Tim, and Nigel, thank you for joining us on this episode of Business Unmuted.
Thank you.